a best spider voice.
All right, I'll do
What
it.
if it's just like a...
I just mouth the words. I don't say them aloud.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Greg.
I'm Silmarillion.
I'm Dan.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time, Melkor and Ungoliant ambushed the great feast of Manwë and killed the two trees, leaving the world in darkness. Today we begin Chapter 9, which can be found on page 78 of the second edition. Chapter 9, of the Flight of the Noldor. After a time, a great concourse gathered about the Ring of Doom, and the Valar sat in shadow, for it was night. But the stars of Varda now glimmered overhead, and the air was clear. For the winds of Manwë had driven away the vapors of death, and rolled back the shadows of the sea. Then Yavanna arose, and stood upon Ezellohar, the green mound, but it was bare now and black. And she laid her hands upon the trees, but they were dead and dark, and each branch that she touched broke and fell lifeless at her feet. Then many voices were lifted in lamentation, and it seemed to those that mourned that they had drained to the dregs the cup of woe that Melkor had filled for them. But it was not so. Yavanna spoke before the Valar, saying, "The light of the trees has passed away, and lives now only in the Silmarils of Feanor. Foresighted was he. Even for those who are mightiest under Iluvatar, there is some work that they may accomplish once, and once only. The light of the trees I brought into being, and within Ea, I can do so never again. Yet had I but a little of that light, I could recall life to the trees ere their roots decay, and then our hurt should be healed, and the malice of Melkor be confounded." Then Manwë spoke and said, "Hearest thou, Feanor, son of Finwë, the words of Yavanna? Wilt thou grant what she would ask?" There was long silence, but Feanor answered no word. Then Tulkas cried, "Speak, O Noldor, yea or nay. But who shall deny Yavanna? And did not the light of the Silmarils come from her work in the beginning?" But Aule the Maker said, "Be not hasty. We ask a greater thing than thou knowest. Let him have peace yet a while." But Feanor spoke then and cried bitterly, "For the less even as for the greater, there is some deed that he may accomplish but once only, and in that deed his heart shall rest. It may be that I can unlock my jewels, but never again shall I make their like. And if I must break them, I shall break my heart, and I shall be slain, first of all the Eldar in Aman." "Not the first," said Mandos. But they did not understand his word, and again there was silence, while Feanor brooded in darkness. It seemed to him that he was beset in a ring of enemies, and the words of Melkor returned to him, saying that the Silmarils were not safe, if the Valar would possess them. "And is he not Vala, as are they?" said his thought. "And does he not understand their hearts? Yea, a thief shall reveal thieves." Then he cried aloud, "This thing I will not do of free will, but if the Valar will constrain me, then shall I know indeed that Melkor is one of their kindred." Then Mando said, "Thou hast spoken." And Nienna arose and went up unto Ezellohar, and cast back her grey hood, and with her tears washed away the defilements of Ungoliant. And she sang in mourning for the bitterness of the world and the marring of Arda. But even as Nienna mourned, there came messengers from Formenos, and they were Noldor, and bore new tidings of evil. For they told how a blind darkness came northward, and in the midst walked some power for which there was no name, and the darkness issued from it. But Melkor also was there, and he came to the house of Feanor, and there he slew Finwë, king of the Noldor, before his doors, and spilled the first blood in the blessed realm. For Finwë alone had not fled from the horror of the dark. And they told that Melkor had broken the stronghold of Formenos, and taken all the jewels of the Noldor that were hoarded in that place, and the Silmarils were gone. Then Feanor rose, lifting up his hand before Manwë. He cursed Melkor, naming him Morgoth, the black foe of the world. And by that name only was he known to the Eldar ever after. And he cursed also the summons of Manwë, and the hour in which he came to Taniquetil, thinking in the madness of his rage and grief that had he been at Formenos, his strength would have availed more than to be slain also, as Melkor had purposed. Then Feanor ran from the Ring of Doom and fled into the night, for his father was dearer to him than the light of Valinor, or the peerless work of his hands. And who among sons of elves or of men have held their fathers of greater worth? Many there grieved for the anguish of Feanor, but his loss was not his alone. And Yavanna wept by the mound in fear that the darkness should swallow the last rays of the light of Valinor forever. For though the Valar did not yet understand fully what had befallen, they perceived that Melkor had called upon some aid that came from beyond Arda. The Silmarils had passed away, and all one it may seem whether Feanor had said yea or nay to Yavanna. Yet had he said yea at the first, before the tidings came from Formenos, it may be that his after deeds would have been other than they were. But now the doom of the Noldor drew near. So, to summarize what we just read, Yavanna explains to the Valar gathered that the two trees might be restored or revived in some way using the Silmarils. The Valar then petition Feanor to willfully give them up, but he refuses, believing the lies that Melkor has sown. As Nienna mourns the destruction, Melkor goes to Formenos and slays Finwë, steals the Silmarils, and sneaks away.
Real quick, is this the first outright murder?
Yeah.
This is murder number one.
In Arda, right? Or Amon.
No, in the whole story.
Well, I mean, Melkor murdered.
Who else is he?
Remember, we talked about.
No, I don't.
When the elves were still before they came to Amon.
Yeah.
The hunter Orome, they thought they saw him running around in the woods, and Melkor and his fell beasts were killing elves.
Well, we didn't know if
they
were. I mean, it's implied, right? Because they were disappearing, right? No remains were found; they just disappeared.
All right.
But this is the first like intense main character being murdered.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, 80 pages in.
Finwë.
There we go.
I love
short.
why Finwë is there. I love so many things about what happens. I mean, it's tragic, but the fact that Finwë alone had not fled from the horror of the dark. So when Ungoliant was eating the light of the trees and darkness was covering everything, like he alone stayed back in Formenos. And then Feanor's love for him, is even more than the light, even more than anything he's made. I love that. Like who among sons of elves or of men have held their fathers of greater worth? You hear we've heard a lot of negative things about Feanor, just some character flaws, but now we hear that he just has this great love for his father, great loyalty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing. Oh, you talk.
No, I just wanted to agree with that. That was all. Just letting that sink in.
Another thing I really love, and I've said this before, but how Tolkien, when his characters speak, they speak so distinctly, and I love how we're led into a little bit of how the Valar interact with each other. So, you have this problem of the trees. They cannot be created again. Except with the Silmarils. Like if they're used, maybe broken open, if Yavanna can get her hands on that light, she could create the trees again. But it's interesting how each of the Valar respond in this situation. So Manwë is the one who kind of initiates. He says, okay, Feanor, what do you say? Like, would you grant Yavanna these stones? And then, or the Silmarils? And Tolkis cries, speak! And because he's about justice, he's like right now, like we have to. You can't deny.
You
Yavanna.
talk to your mother when she's talking to you.
But Aule, who taught Feanor how to craft, is like, you don't really know what you're asking, Tolkis. Like these, you don't know how precious these are. Like how much of a masterpiece these are. And then Feanor, cries bitterly. He's like, if I give these up, I will die too. And then Mondos reveals this very cryptic idea of you will not be the first to be slain. It's like, what? It's just so epic. I love the interactions with the Valar, and then we hear how Mandos's words come true.
You've heard me
you
say
didn't mention my favorite Vala, which is Valier, which is Nienna.
Nienna's awesome.
Who washes away all the disgusting filth.
Oh yeah, well she didn't
with
speak. I was talking about the dialogue, but yeah, that's.
I've got some mid-journey art for that, by the way.
She cried.
Yeah, white. Yeah, I love that line too.
Yeah, me
it's
too.
Beautiful.
This is the we'll actually have it on screen at some point, but I got some mid-journey art for that specific scene because it struck me too that her mourning. Oh, also just the Yavanna touch, she's the Valia of growing things and created the two trees and has to go to them and to touch them, but not only to touch them when they're dead, but her touching them breaks them further, so they're crumbling. The trauma that must have given her, that not even her touch could reform them. Wow, that must have cut deep.
Yeah.
You've heard me say this before, and I again, it's the themes. It's the Gollum kind of themes. Feanor, brooding in the dark. It seemed to him that he was beset in a ring of enemies. It's this suspicion that washes over him out of his love of this thing that he's created. I mean, that's the difference. Gollum did not create it, but Gollum thinks that he kind of has a right to it. And he wants the Silmarils to be safe. That's his motive, and that's Gollum's motive throughout the Lord of the Rings. Is He doesn't want anyone to have it. He doesn't want Sauron to have it. He doesn't want the Fellowship to have it. Unfortunately, he's in an oath that he can't break. And so I just see this kind of echoing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Silmarils, obviously, the power of them will end up in the ring. So it's right. It's right. They're forged from, like, there's a connection to the Silmarils and the ring. Am I now talking out my backside? Nerds. Nerd alert. Nerd alert.
Gesundheit.
Yeah.
I don't think there's that kind of a connection.
No, I don't think so. Either,
So-
but I don't remember. I'm really hesitant to like talk about future things anymore because I don't want to say something wrong. I'd rather just not say anything than say something wrong. So we can figure out as we go. But
Okay.
I think the Silmarils are described. We read before. There's like a fire within them. It's kind of like, I think it compares them to how the Valar wear like their form as a raiment. In that way, the Silmarils, they're more like this burning fire spirit thing that's encased in like a gem. And so
Like,
it would make sense that
is
like
part of them.
right. The light is part of them, and the light is active too. It kind of has agency, right? Like when light would shine on it, it would delight in receiving light and then give it back in new ways. So there's something like really interesting about the light where it's kind of alive in a certain sense. Mm-hmm. So even just hearing that description, you can kind of sympathize with Feanor, like not just because they're his work, but because
It's
there's
worth
something
protecting.
yeah, like just cracking them open like walnuts, and then spilling their lifeless flames onto the tree just sounds too much.
Too much.
I wouldn't be strong enough to hand them over. I could tell you that much.
Greg, we weren't able to hear your spider voice. I'm bummed about that. I thought you were going
know,
to read some
I know.
spider
I guess
words.
it has to be you, Cameron.
Well, she
Yeah,
didn't
it's
say
me.
anything. In this
Tune in
one, but
next
yeah.
week.
Yeah, seriously.
So
go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I'm still fixated. I know you don't want to talk about future things, but with the rings of power, does Melkor, is it when he forges them? Is it in mockery of
Melkor
the
doesn't forge the rings, does he? I thought Sauron.
You're thinking
forged
of
them.
Sauron.
Sorry. When he does it, is it in kind of mockery of the power that was contained in the Silmarils?
I don't know.
Do
We'll
we
have to
get
read
to
a-
that in
we'll
this
have to read
story?
on.
Will this story tell us the origins of that, of the rings
very-
of power?
No, very, very like lightly does it touch upon the Lord of the Rings narrative.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to return.
So it's
to that
not a
one.
big deal in the grand picture.
But
These are
I guess
bigger
the connection
conflicts,
would be that
But Amazon would have me think otherwise.
I believe it was Aule who was the one who kind of befriended or recommended or something, had a relationship with Saruman, who's crafty.
Oh, Saruman.
Sauron. What?
With Saruman.
Yeah.
You mean with Sauron?
Saruman,
Oh.
who crafts his Uruk-hai and Orthanc and all that. But Sauron is also a crafty guy because he makes the ring of power. So I mean, there is a connection between like Aule and the makers of things learning how to through lore and craftiness.
Yeah, I guess crafting things and then infusing like intrinsic power into them.
and how those things can lead someone to envy them.
Yeah. Although the difference would be obviously the ring in of itself is evil, but the Silmarils in of themselves are good.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, returning to this section that we've read, there's a couple of little points I wanted to touch on at the very end of this chapter that are, one is kind of cryptic. So, okay, it seems from the reading that everything happened so fast, the Valar didn't really even they didn't perceive everything that happened. It was just darkness, right? Because Ungoliant's like spewing darkness everywhere. And it says, though the Valar did not yet understand fully what had befallen, they perceived that Melkor had called upon some aid that came from beyond Arda. Is that referring to Ungoliant, or is that something else, like something beyond that?
I think it's referring to Ungoliant because I think the way the geography is, where they were having their feast, they wouldn't be right next to the trees. So the trees were attacked and like spilled their light, and they were left in darkness. And then when Manwë tried to see like where this cloud is going, this dark cloud that Melkor is a part of, he could not touch what was inside of it. So there's a mystery still about what exactly the creature is, I think.
Shrouded by the dark side.
Remind me, where is that? Where's that quote?
This is on page 76. No. Yes, 76.
Wait, where? I'm sorry. Can you read it out?
If you like what you hear.
No, don't you dare. Don't you dare.
Oh, I'm sorry. I read
it out.
That was not the right... I didn't give you the right page number.
Oh.
79.
Can you read it out for me?
For though the Valar did not yet understand fully what had befallen, they perceived that Melkor had called upon some aid that came from beyond Arda. But isn't Ungoliant from Arda? It's maybe just... They just don't know. It's a mystery, so they're like... This is something that we just have no concept of.
Yeah.
Well, okay, the other part, too, that I wanted to touch on was it points out that... Okay, the very next lines, actually. It says, the Silmarils had passed away, and all one it may seem whether Feanor had said yea or nay. So, when they ask him to hand over the Silmarils, it's kind of too late at that point because Melkor's already on his way to Formenos to take them. But then it says... So it's saying... It doesn't matter one way or another. There was one outcome. They were going to be taken. But then it says, yet had he said yea at the first, before the tidings came from Formenos, it may be that his after deeds would have been other than they were. I think that's pretty interesting. I think maybe what that's getting at is his disposition. If he somehow managed to like muster the strength to give these things, or to be kind of like really, I guess, magnanimous. Like it would have been a big task to give these things up, these Silmarils. If he would have been willing to do that, maybe he would have perceived the following things differently and not seen himself as being in a ring of enemies, but seen as... Right. But there's something about like that act of the will that he made to deny them that really... Like, I wonder if maybe one way to say it is by him saying no when asked to give them up, he kind of like did damage to himself in that moment too. Or like there was like a kind of corruption that happened within his own heart or something.
It makes me think of the nature of the Silmarils is that clearly it can corrupt. They can corrupt a person. Well, maybe it's not them corrupting. A person can allow themselves to be corrupted by the lure of them, but then they also provide life and light and so on and so forth. I'm just trying to like figure out in my mind the difference between like the Silmarils, which are inherently good, and something like the Ring of Power, which is dark and it corrupts.
Yeah, there's a shadow associated with the ring that whenever it's used, you go deeper into the shadow.
You can't do the opposite. Yeah. But you can't use it for good. But then at the same time, you can resist it, and some seem to be immune to it. For example, Tom Bombadil. As we discussed, he'd just lose it, and that would be really inconvenient. Samwise just didn't really seem to be. Just all right, I carry it for a while, I guess. Like, it wasn't really.
Well, the Silmarils are different though because I think they're good.
Yes,
they were never meant to be a weapon or like a right. It kind of reminds me of something that you had said one time. We were, when we were working with young musicians, And it seems like every year we would encounter, like, there would be one really talented one and others would be jealous, you know? Yeah. And I remember you saying something like, that's just going to happen. You know, I mean, like, not that we want it to happen, but
yeah.
That's not, is it such a bad thing that happens? That can be an opportunity for growth. And even for these characters, like, just the immense goodness and beauty of the Silmarils, not all of them choose to lust after them, or they don't experience it. Or maybe they do. Other characters maybe do, like, kind of like Galadriel with the Ring of Power, where she is, like, tempted by that power, but then decides not to take it. There might be other characters it's just not saying that are really moved by the beauty of the Silmarils, but were able to, you know, use self-control and not try to take them. I don't know. Any final thoughts?
The Great Temptation, it seems to me, and I still don't understand it, so I'm still trying to understand it. The Great Temptation with the Silmarils seems to just kind of want to not ever let their light be shared and used, and just to hide them away and keep them for yourself.
Well, that's for Feanor. That's his temptation. Is that for anyone else?
Well, for Melkor too.
That's the I mean, that's the only one that we really have.
Melkor's not really in it for the light, is he? Or he just that's what he.
Well, he likes them. We do hear about him seeing them and liking them earlier on. It does mention that he grew enamored or something by them. But I mean, I guess
I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. At the very beginning, when it talks about why Melkor, like, dissented in the music, it says that he wanted to possess the imperishable flame, and so maybe there is something about the Silmarils that it was like the most, like, pure extension of that in the visible world or something, you know.
And we're seeing that, like, okay, look, they can actually be used now to, you know, maybe bring life back to the trees. But the temptation is like, no, I want to keep them and I want them to be protected. With the Ring of Power, though, it's almost the opposite. It's not like you want to hide it away. It's you want to use it. Like it can give you power. It's sort of the difference between gold and
a gun.
Bitcoin.
The golden gun. Yeah, like not gold and Bitcoin, but something that is the difference between gold and gold. Gold as a store of value versus gold as being a valuable like component in medical equipment. Somebody might want to, like, store it away and I'm not ever going to give this up because it has value that I can pass on to generations, where there could be machines that are built that bring life to people.
I think the ring is kind of like an NFT. What do you guys think? It's this non-fungible token.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Maybe not. One of a kind.
Yeah, there's only one.
All right, we'll wrap up here before we go too far off the rails. If you like what you hear, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. Follow us everywhere at Before the Fellowship, and send any comments. Some of these questions that we're asking, we'd really be happy to hear what you all think. So send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. If you have any particular complaints, you can write "Attention Cameron" in the subject line, and then he'll make sure to get those.
If you know Guy K, if you could reach out to him.
We would love to connect with Guy K.
We want him to come on the episode in the future and read with us.
So join us next week as we read The Greatest Story You've Never Heard, Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.